Perfect. Thanks for bringing it.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming out here tonight and joining us. Before we begin, I'll be doing the land acknowledgement and then introducing our presentation speaker tonight. So thank you for joining us in this place called Wilkinson, one that has traditionally been a meeting place and a place of shared stories, connections, and learning. My name is Jill, and I am the Outreach and Communications Specialist here at AWA. Before we begin, I'm going to acknowledge the place we gathered tonight as the ancestral home of the Treaty 7 signatories, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai First Nations, the Fuksino First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and the Stoney First Nations. And this area is also within the Métis Nation homeland. As a provincial organization, we serve the entire province of Alberta, which also includes treaties 4, 6, 8, and 10. We express gratitude and respect for these lands and commit to advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples to ensure justice, equality, and sustainability for all and the natural world that we rely on. I now want to introduce our speaker for this evening. Dr. Shivangi Mishra is our conservation biologist whose work bridges conservation science and community well-being across continents and ecosystems. She completed her doctorate at the University of Lucknow in India and is in the midst of her second postdoctoral appointment at the University of Calgary. Across all her work, she's to uncover what wildlife and communities are like, can teach us about resilient ecosystems, respectful stewardship, and shared futures for people and nature.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Deborah, and the whole AWA team, and thanks everyone for being here today. Namaskar. I'm from India, and before I begin, I would like to ask a simple question to you: that what does conservation really mean? Is it about managing ecosystems, managing species, or something more? It's about relationships between people, the land, the wildlife, and the natural world as whole. And throughout my work, with God's grace, over the years, I came to understand that conservation is not just about science. It's also about these meaningful relationships and the interconnected web of life. So that's why I am happy to present about what wildlife and communities teach us. And to begin with, I want to acknowledge the land I am on today in Calgary, and from the traditional and ancestral territories of the people of Treaty 7. As a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Calgary, my work is shaped by Indigenous perspectives and relationships to land and water, particularly through my work with the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Indigenous ways of climate and water sustainability for the planetary health and well-being. My research has also brought me into connection with Inuit communities during my first postdoctoral research in Cambridge Bay and across Nunavut. And I want to acknowledge these lands also and the knowledge systems that continue to guide me in how I understand wildlife and ecosystems today. At the same time, because this journey began from India, so where I first learned to see wildlife, not just as a species, but also as a part of everyday life, deeply intertwined with people, culture, and landscapes. And from there, my journey began. So it's like I'm very grateful for the land and the people. And across these different places, India, the Arctic, and in here in Canada, I've come to understand that it is the the meaning of conservation is deeply rooted in relationships, responsibility, and learning. So today I'm grounded in place and guided by relationships when I'm here today. Now my professional timeline to give you a good glimpse about how my journey began and from where I started. And you can see that over the years, I came across different research areas, but the most special one began when my PhD journey began in India on Egyptian vultures. And it is at that time I realized how important it is to work for conservation and for working towards saving a species or ecosystem. Why this topic? Because conservation is rooted in relationships, as I said that. It's about connection with people, land, and wildlife. Because the people on the land, Indigenous and local communities, hold essential knowledge for stewardship. And human well-being and ecosystem health are deeply interconnected. Therefore, conservation is a shared responsibility across cultures and regions. You can see the first image. This is from one of the breeding sites of Egyptian vultures in India. And because I spent years in field work, I have had deep relationship with people, and she is no longer with us now, but her wisdom and blessings continue to guide me today. And when I imagine myself, I have never imagined myself that someday I'll be here or I'll be working across ecosystems to get a chance to explore more. But I feel like these blessings and guidance and wisdom are always with me. And when I worked on breeding ecology of Egyptian vultures, she used to share her deep observational and behavioral changes in the species, and because Egyptian vultures reuse their nests. So people, they know, who live in close association with these species, they know a lot more about these species than any scientist or researcher would know. The next image is from Cambridge Bay, and this is with an Indigenous elder when I co-organized community-based workshop there, which was focused on musk-oxen and genomics in the community. We have had deep discussions around these species like musk-oxen and caribou, and there were other elders as well, and they shared their deep knowledge about the animal and how they are experiencing the changes. Because these animals are not only important ecologically for a researcher or wildlife biologist or other people, but also these are culturally significant for the people up in the high Arctic and surrounding regions. They are deeply significant in their way of life. And decline in those species impacts them too. Well, I'm sorry for my scroll down. Perfect. So now global conservation challenges, talking about the changes we are facing today. Accelerating biodiversity loss, which is threatening ecosystem stability. Altering habitats, species, and ecological interactions. And there are challenges around approaches, how we address those changes. The conservation is often siloed across disciplines and sectors. Loss of traditional knowledge systems. So weakening long-standing ecological stewardship and diverse ways of knowing also impacts how we address the changes. Global challenges require global collaboration, shared solution across regions and knowledge systems. It's very, very important to know that these challenges are not single-dimensional. They are multidimensional. And we need collaborations across disciplines, across regions, across diverse sectors. Not only education, but also other areas. So now connecting those challenges with the real world scenario, I would like to begin with this case study, which is focused on my Egyptian vulture research in India. And from this research, few major insights came out were like integrated approaches are essential. Combining ecological research with community engagement strengthens the conservation outcomes because Egyptian vultures live in close association with human settlements. Therefore, it's very important to know about diverse ways of knowing, like there are different types of knowledge systems. Understanding those systems is vital. Local context matters. Region-specific knowledge is critical for effective intervention. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, which is my study site, there the population of Egyptian vultures is like stable at some of the parts. Although they are globally endangered, but they are thriving. So there are local conditions that are impacting too. We have huge livestock population. UP is one of the most populated states, province in India. And those livestock, in the rural areas, the cattle or their animals are died, they dump the carcass at specific designated sites. And then these sites serve as active feeding grounds for Egyptian vultures. So it's like a vulture restaurant where vultures come and forage. So the situations are region specific. Human behavior is central to conservation success. It's very important that we do awareness and participation from the local people, volunteers directly influence the outcomes. There were some of the sites in most of the sites, I made a team of local volunteers and I used to explore the sites and for example, nesting sites, roosting sites with those people. And they knew more than me when I first started. I was like, when I found the first nest, it was like the golden moment for me during my research. And there were local people who guided me. So it's so important to have that connection and relationship with the people. Addressing systemic threats. Conservation must go beyond species protection to tackle habitat, food systems, and more broader socio-ecological drivers. Now, Egyptian vultures. They are one of the smallest old world vulture species distributed across Africa, Europe, and Asia. And they have a key role in ecosystem health as they are key scavenger species, and they keep the ecosystem balanced by cleaning the carcass. They act as nature's cleanup crew. So they are important and vital for the balance of ecosystem. Their plumage changes. When they are juvenile, the plumage is darker, and then when they reach the adult stage, they become whiter with black flight feathers. And they are very intelligent birds. They use tools to break the eggs. They have been reported. And they're very intelligent. I have seen them during my field work, opening the carcass with sticks. So it's like every time in the field was like a new experience for me. I got something new whenever I used to visit and explore. And they are often associated with human settlements and livestock presence, as I said. You can see the pictures from the field sites. And I call them my handsomes because to me they are one of the most beautiful species. I wonder why people, like some people consider them as ugly birds or something like that, but these ones are specifically very beautiful. So they are one of the most beautiful vulture species too. These are the images from the roosting site of Egyptian vultures. As you can see, there are Egyptian vulture adults and sub-adults and juveniles. But the juveniles are black. Sometimes they are confused with black kites. So there are black kites also, but there are juveniles, Egyptian vultures as well, with all this races of lice. And this is a video.
You should be able to, well, I can do it if you want.
Okay.
Well, perfect. Just fighting over control.
So this is one of the sites where Egyptian vultures have strong population, but that doesn't mean that this is permanent. Overall, globally, the population is declining, and therefore, it's so important to understand the regional importance. Because when they're thriving in large number, it means we need to understand why, and we need to understand how long they will survive like this, because they are declining overall. So, in my opinion, thinking about the species when they are present is much more important than thinking about them when they are globally endangered and critically endangered and extinct. So it also shows the regional and local context. This is a picture of one of the foraging sites. And you can see that Egyptian vultures are foraging with cattle, egrets, and other species. They are quite social. And they are okay when other species feed with them. But now, as the populations are declining, so at some of my field sites, I saw the competition with feral dogs. So there is a need to learn more, to work more on this aspect. Like, are there inter-specific competitions or any other species displacing them when they forage? This is from the breeding sites, and the breeding and feeding sites are not too far because they need to forage and then they need to go to their nests. So this shows the livestock population in Uttar Pradesh. And like I said, people, when their animals, cattle die, they put them at a designated site in the around the villages. And these sites serve as important foraging grounds for Egyptian vultures. So this is like a local vulture restaurant, and region specific conditions. Listening and learning from local communities, why I keep saying that is also because species, conservation of any species is not like an isolated thing. It's because they are living, the animals, the humans, they are all living together. We are all living together. We are all interconnected. So some of the insights I got from elders and the perception, there were some section of people who used to consider, like they said, they told me that they were considered as ill omen, and so the people used to kill them at times. And at one of my study sites, I came to know that there are some people who like, we used to consider them that these are big ugly birds and they kill the smaller birds. So they used to destroy the nests and eggs. So think about the impact on their breeding. For a species which breeds only once in a year and lays only 1 or 2 eggs maximum. And you are destroying their egg. If because there were not so many people who told me that, but there were some people who, so those moments also made me think about this thing that it's very important to spread awareness. That this is nature and this is trophic cycle, you cannot disturb that. If they're killing smaller birds, that doesn't mean that they are bad birds. Tigers also kill. So it's like nature's trophic level and you are disturbing that. So how important it is to also like teach local people and some communities, learning and teaching and doing everything together. So that connects further with multi-level community engagement. Because it's not only a single level awareness or engagement. So I gave expert talks amongst forest officials because they know about animals and species, but it's also important to let them know what are the specific differences between other vulture species and this and other things, like a knowledge exchange. Not only I talked about my Egyptian vultures, but also they share a lot. So it's like a mutual ongoing thing. And they are very helpful when you do research work in field and isolated areas. So it's like together we have to work for conservation. This is with bird watchers. I also used to do bird watching with my field work, and when I'm not in field, I used to be somewhere moving across national parks or even in normal parks around my place. And I learned, I interacted, I talked about Egyptian vultures all the time. That's also one of the reasons people used to say that she's a vulture girl. And they remember like that, still they remember me like a vulture girl. Now they're like, you became an Arctic researcher. We thought you would follow that vulture career. And I'm like, that is not over. I'm still working. I still celebrate National Vulture Awareness Day every year. Whatever I can do from my side, still I do. I never forget them. I cannot. Because they are so important for me. I dream about them. And this is true. This is not like I'm just saying that, I mean it. This second picture is from a school in UP, India. And what was interesting to me was also that in rural areas, students were more active. When I asked about vultures, they immediately told me vultures are endangered birds and this and that. But when I went to the urban areas, schools, I didn't get that back. They didn't know, most of them. Only a few students, one of the few, like they reverted back when I asked. So it's like interesting. This is also one of the things I got to know, that how closely you are associated with wildlife animals when you are in rural areas or living closer to the animals and birds. And also the enthusiasm level. So that school is very close to my heart. This is with local volunteers. Now, like I said, most of the times, especially during the breeding surveys and the seasons when there were storms around, So they used to, like, I gave them my number and they used to inform me that this nest is like destroyed by the storm. It was like, I cannot come right now, but I'll be there. So they were so active. They were not only enthusiastic with me, but they were very active in giving information. And still, like now I'm in Canada, so it's like international numbers. It's a little bit of disconnect, but they were very active until I came here. So I used to get messages, comments about things. Oh, your vulture is sitting in the nest, breathing happily. It's like good news for me every time I used to hear about that. It's thriving. These were the awareness material I made in Hindi. Now that context is also important because when you are working with local communities, you have to make the awareness material accessible and understandable. So it's not only during the conferences I went to present my work, I also used to think about how we can translate it easier to be understandable by people in their language. Because it is very important to reach out to people in their language. So knowledge translation and knowledge mobilization, thinking about these aspects is so important and crucial. I can talk about addiction just for a day, for night. But I need to talk about other areas as well. So this is about my first postdoctoral research. And it was focused on Arctic genomics. And it was about role of genomics and DNA-based tools in fostering and supporting Arctic biodiversity co-management. As we have already talked about, the climate change, the environmental global challenges, but in the Arctic, they are more tightly coupled than anywhere on the Earth. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to expand my work towards more broader level and to explore more broader ecosystems. Because Arctic research was one of my dreams, and it came true when I got this work and came from India. So this is also important because there are the threats, other threats like pollutants, diseases, and invasive species which are impacting the key Arctic species like muskoxen and caribou. Like I said, that these are not only ecologically important, but they are also culturally significant. And they impact indigenous food security and livelihoods. And they impact people. And what is their future? Now, why genomics? Because there are some threats which are hidden and cryptic. So tools like genomics and DNA-based tools like environmental eDNA monitoring. We can take samples from air, water, soil. We can get to know about species, their movement, their changes in population. And therefore, it's very important to think about advanced tools and techniques. And genomics could be very helpful in species monitoring, pathogen identification, discovering that if there is a new species, or securing like saving indigenous food and working towards co-management can be helpful for indigenous food sovereignty overall. And addressing other climate change impacts and identification of invasive species. One particular significant threat, one of the significant threats in the Arctic are emerging diseases. There are zoonotic diseases increasing in the Arctic. And As I said, everything is interconnected. Range expansion of southern species, for example, migratory birds and ravens are increasing nowadays with the increasing temperatures. They might be vectors of pathogens. They might carry bacteria, virus, or other drug-resistant organisms. And therefore, it's very important to use advanced tools like DNA-based tools and genomics to understand the host cycle of pathogens. For example, brucellosis, erysipelothrax, and lungworms. Susan Woods, she's working on this area, and I learned a lot from her about this aspect. And lungworms are increasing in muscovine. So there are different hosts for this pathogen, and it might impact humans as well. So the research is going on and people are working, and it's like genomics and DNA-based tools could be helpful in identifying those hidden aspects of climate change. And this is a picture from Cambridge Bay where Susan Woods is showing a sample to Indigenous elders. I visited Cambridge Bay in January 2024. What is this project about? What was this research about? It was about collaboration, it was about co-development, and how the genomics knowledge mobilization tools could be made understandable, and how genomics knowledge could be made understandable and accessible to the people, and what can be done to inform the biodiversity co-management in the Arctic by engaging and communicating with diverse rights holders and stakeholders through conversation at different platforms like in-person meetings and meetings through conferences and workshops. These pictures are from Muscovine and Genomics in the community workshop in Cambridge Bay. And this work shows that supporting Arctic biodiversity through genomics informed approaches will be helpful. But it's very important to raise awareness amongst diverse end users about this for informing policy development and co-management strategies. At the same time, recognizing the barriers. What are the challenges associated with it? When we are trying to do this work, how this has been done, how this could be done with like respectful collaborations and partnerships with Indigenous people in Arctic. And this is from the conversation article, and was about improving Arctic food security through DNA science and respectful collaboration with Indigenous peoples. And this image is from Nunavik, when we co-organized second community-based workshop in Kujuak. And this is Alan Gordon, who is working very actively in Nunavik about marine animals and genomics. This second workshop was about marine animal and genomics in the community. So it was like magic and magic. Now coming to the current work, I am now in my second postdoc, and it is focused on Indigenous-led research. What does Indigenous-led research look like? How you see? So Indigenous, it is when Indigenous communities determine why, what, and how research is conducted. And considering Indigenous knowledge systems as foundational, not as something supplementing Western scientific knowledge, but these are foundational. equal and sometimes greater than scientific approaches. Where Indigenous knowledge holders are recognized as experts. And research is guided by Indigenous values and standards. Meaning that the outcomes are defined within Indigenous frameworks. To talk about the framework, how does it look like? So, I'm currently learning because I recently started this postdoc in January 15, from January 15 onwards. So I'm learning from my supervisor, Dr. Deborah McGregor, who holds Canada Excellence Research Chair in Indigenous Ways of Planetary Well-being. And recognizing that developing understanding of Indigenous research methodologies and ethics are crucial. And it is an iterative process, like centered in trust, care, and respect, guided by community, Indigenous elders, and where the objectives of research project are decided with communities from the beginning. And at each step, it's like an ongoing thing, ongoing process. It's not like when you are sharing the outcomes with them, you just have them as spatial partners or collaborators. It's like you are working with them, for them, and together. As a whole, as a holistic approach. And when the data is ethically shared with respectful relationships and collaboration with values and relational way of proceeding further in the work. Now, as I talked about knowledge systems, Indigenous knowledge is foundational, as I said, and it is place-based system of understanding. There are diverse ways of knowing in conservation. There are multiple ways of knowing. And ethical and inclusive frameworks for decision making is essential. And it is essential for the improved biodiversity monitoring and ecological insights and more holistic addressing the changes more in a more holistic way, supporting resilient and adaptive ecosystem management. Indigenous relational ontologies. There are interconnected relationships in Indigenous relational ontologies, ways of being, where we realize that there is a relationship between humans, non-humans, and the environment. Ways of knowing, epistemology, which focuses on that knowledge emerges from lived experience, observation, and community practices. The methodology, ways of doing, learning through participation, relationships, and practice. Axiology, the meaning ethics are grounded in relationships and responsibilities to all beings. Relational accountability, actions and knowledge are accountable to the entire web of relationships. Practical takeaways for conservation. Throughout my experience, what I learned is this, that there is not only one way to know about species, ecosystem, or climate change, or any environmental change. There are multiple knowledge systems in conservation, and we should learn and we should do research which is relational, and Indigenous-led and with community-driven approaches. Learning through relationships with people, land, and wildlife is essential and crucial. Acting with respect, responsibility, and reciprocity is essential. And therefore, I try to do knowledge mobilization at my personal level too. During my free time, I am active on YouTube. I do record and share wildlife videos on my channel, The Soaring Tales. I try to publish not just in journals, but also for magazines and publishing books. So this is my first book, which was on majestic Egyptian vulture, and it has all the information, most of the information about Egyptian vultures and my experiences in the field I share from this book in an easy language, not a very scientific way, with jargons, but so that it can be easily understandable by a broad range of people and audience. And like this, today I'm presenting here. This is also like, I feel grateful and happy to get this chance to share and to learn today. These are some of the selective recognitions so far, and call to action. We need to learn to listen to the land, learn from the relationships, and act with responsibility. And I don't see myself as only a researcher or a conservation biologist, but this has also become my way of life. So it's not only a professional work for me anymore, it's like my lifetime passion and my dream to create a change and to do something from my heart at my level. And this picture is from first sunrise of 2024 in Cambridge Bay when I first visited High Arctic and met Indigenous elders and communities. And then I changed the way I used to think before. So at all the steps, it didn't only build my skills, it was like learning and experiencing diverse systems, knowledge, and at all the steps, I learned something new. So life is all about learning. It's a never-ending process. I would like to say thanks to my current institution, University of Calgary, and I'm deeply grateful for getting an opportunity to continue working here and my University of Calgary and my University of Lucknow. And I'm grateful to collaborators, mentors, and communities involved in this work. I'm thankful to all. So thank you so much. And namaste.
The work that you're doing now, your second postdoc, it's working with Indigenous groups. Are those focused on Alberta Indigenous groups, or?
Yeah, it's more broader. It's about First Nations, and if I talk about specifics, so my supervisor is Anishinaabe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay.
Getting to learn about more First Nations communities and Anishinaabe.
You mentioned kind of during your presentation about wanting like kind of that dream of kind of doing more research in the Arctic. And I'm curious if you could get into a little bit more of like why that region was so something that you did aspire to do some work in. Like what was kind of interesting to you about that region? that you kind of sought it out after working in a very different part of the world in India?
Oh, yeah, this is a very interesting question. And so, like I said, I never imagined myself working in the Arctic after working on Egyptian
Yeah.
vultures and in a very different landscape.
Mhm.
But I always wanted to expand my work. It is when I worked on Egyptian vultures, on one species, I found so many things, those intrigued me, like those perspectives and those experiences made me think about that. What if I get a chance to work on a more broader ecosystem and I can expand my work? I can look about how the other ecosystems are being impacted by the climate change. We know that climate change is no longer a future issue. It's going on and it's crucial to study. And so I wanted to explore more and expand my knowledge and experiences so that I can come to know about the other challenges and how I could be helpful in doing something at more broader level. It doesn't mean that I'm disconnected with Egyptian vultures or other species, but it also expanded my way of thinking and the way I now perceive ecosystems and animals and people is very different from the way I used to do before. So it's like an ongoing journey. I might end up working again on vultures. You never know where life takes you. But the goal of my life is to work for Mother Nature. So it's not specifically tied to a species or an ecosystem. It's like working for Mother Nature. Whatever I could do. I feel that. But I'm born for that. Yeah. Thank you.
Questions on?
Not any specifically, but we might send a little message just to say.
Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. I was just curious about your work with the Inuit. And you spoke of Indigenous conservation. Is there a word in that the Inuit have different dialects? But is there a word in their language for conservation? And how does it relate to any taboos around hunting of the muskox? Do they have any taboos regarding breeding season where they avoid females, or is there? It's a two-part question.
No, it's a very good question. And talking about term, like, are you asking about the language in the
Yes.
Indian language?
Yes,
So we have like, it was just a start, and we have worked on this aspect, like how to translate or how to understand the terms in their language. So I am not sure about what is the particular term for conservation in Inuktitut, but there are dialects and some of our team members, they're working on this aspect. Like, it's a big team. There are partners from other universities, and there is someone who is working on this aspect, and they're trying to like increase and expand this on this aspect, that it's very important to like know and about the dialects, and they vary across different indigenous cultures. So yeah, this is important.
So I worked in the Arctic as well for many years, and every Indigenous group I worked with, they didn't really have a word for conservation because they never had that previous knowledge of like species dying out and having to preserve them, right? It was all like, it's a very circular, like, when there's less species, then we hunt less, or we choose other species to hunt and things like that, right? So I wouldn't say that I never came across like a specific word that was sort of equivalent to conservation. In with any of the different nations that I work with. But it is about being able to communicate, the scientific with traditional knowledge to try and get that concept across, and I think that's the work that,
Yeah,
we're-
yeah, and I think you very rightly said that there might not be any word for conservation because they don't think and see like the way other Western or Eurocentric knowledge systems think about change. So like, yeah, like Deborah said, that they observe, they have their deep indigenous knowledge about the animals and the species, and they hunt when the animal is healthy or the population is surviving. And yeah, it depends on seasons, seasonal variations and things like that. It's like they have also started seeing the change. As per my experience, they told me that all the behavior is changing of their behavior of birds. Also, these things like they're experiencing changes now. But yeah.
I guess, yeah, I also wouldn't mind hearing a bit more about the Arctic genomics, that you were working on. Just in general, like, did you go up there to study, the expansion of these, diseases, and then the challenge was to communicate this with the local population, or were they also feeding into it and that fed into what you were studying, or, yeah, I guess just a bit more detail.
Okay, yeah, thanks for this question. And so I would like to mention that my part in this project was particularly about knowledge mobilization, how to know about diverse perspectives of diverse end users. So I went to the Arctic, high Arctic and subarctic regions for co-organizing community workshops. And then I came across while working and like while co-organizing workshops, I came to know about these diseases and vectors from Susan Hood's research group. So yeah, it's like a big issue, and researchers and scientists are working on this. And why I found this very important area to work to further expand research if I get a chance, or if I come to know about more detailed or understanding about these pathogens and their cycles. But this is not my particular area, and it intrigued me because it is impacting the key Arctic species, and those species are country food for the people. And so identifying the hosts and different stages of any pathogen is like so important, and it's crucial because it's going to impact people when you consume, if they consume disease or meat or animal, and it could be like they could be impacted from the cycle of pathogen. So it's like a broad area people are working, right? Specifically season goods.
So one of the big issues in the Arctic is climate change. As we know, it's heating up a lot faster than others. So there's a lot of like diseases coming out of the ice, but also because there's massive transit now in the Northwest Passage. So ships and tourists and everybody going through there bringing like invasive species. So like we're seeing like species that never occurred in the Arctic Ocean now occurring in the Arctic Ocean. What is that? How does that impact other species? And how does that impact the animals that feed on them? And things like that. So there is actually a lot of genomic research going on in the Arctic right now because of that.
And that's why we did this work, thanks, Sarah, to identify those challenges of these genomics and DNA-based research, and what are the barriers to its implementation in the Arctic. That being said, like I talked about indigenous people, like those species are country food for them. And I worked on identifying diverse perspectives and to understand the challenges associated, like how the research is being done and how it should be done more ethically and grounded in indigenous principles and related, like in a relational way, build on relationships. Because they told me that most of the times, Western researchers, they come, they take their data, they talk to them, and they disappear.
So you're kind of bridging the gap there.
Yeah, my work is to bridge the gap and to understand their perspective also, and other diverse end users' perspective. And these were some of the things those were so important to be addressed.
Yeah, there's a history of, you know, a lot of people think the Arctic is sort of that last bastion of untouched nature, which is true. When you go up there, you will see animals. I'm 60 years old. When I grew up in northern BC, I used to see lots of animals. Nowadays, you don't see them so much. Moving back to the Arctic, all of a sudden you're seeing a lot more species. And a lot of them haven't been identified. So you get these researchers from all over the world who are interested in going and finding species that they can name, and they can, and they do all of this research. And then they take the data and they don't always share it with local people. So that is why this work intrigued me a lot, because I saw by working in the Arctic with different groups, how jaded they were with scientists coming and not sharing and not even asking, right? Not asking, not communicating at all. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted Shivangi to come and give this lecture, because I think it's such an important issue.
Yeah, and our publications will be like coming soon. One of those might be available online in a couple of days, and then the other ones. And yeah, we have to for other researchers for informing the co-management strategy, not just collaboration, but together, co-management.
So I'd like to thank Shivangi for her very interesting presentation. Yeah, for you. So this is a tea trader takes a tea, and then this is one of our handmade 60th anniversary mugs done by Steel Pottery.
I love tea so much.
That's what we also have that in common. So Shivangi and I met not long ago, and I'm an Egyptian archaeologist as well as an environmentalist, and have done research on Egyptian vultures myself, place vultures, and they are very critically endangered in Egypt. I've never seen one in Egypt, and I've been working there for over 25 years. So I was thrilled that she had been working on Egyptian vultures. To an archaeologist is also the goddess Nekhbet. So, we sort of bonded over the Arctic, Egyptian vulture and tea. So
I also really value this bonding. It's like the feeling is mutual. And Egyptian vultures, most of the times when I present about Egyptian vultures, people ask me why they're Egyptian. Why they're named Egyptian vultures, and are they like, if people have no idea where they are like, are they found in Egypt only? That's why they're Egyptian? I said, no,
they're migratory.
they're migratory and they have huge mythological significance in Egyptian culture. So they are the goddess Nekhbet. We discussed about this when we met first. And they're very, very important mythological significance in Egyptian cultures. That's the reason that they are.
So they were first identified in Egypt, so that's how they were identified. It was later on that they realized how, you know, how far they migrate. So it's like having, you know, certain species that you associate with a certain place that you can control where they go in the boundary. So, yeah, really fascinating. Thank you, Shivangi. This was a really interesting topic. I'm glad you shared your work with us. So I just want to say thank you to everyone here and thank you for coming out. And if you were not a member of AWA, please consider coming. It's my job.